24-hour notice cancellation, or you're not expending those funds until you actually stay at the hotel. Or for per diem, certainly you're not going to expend until you take the trip. But really with airfare is the tricky one, right? Because if you have airfare, you book in advance, and when you run into issues is when that booking and that payment is inconsistent with your award period. So if my award ends June 30, and I'm going to go in a conference in August, but I book in June, and now I've paid for funds out of my previous award, but the obligation doesn't happen until my next award period, right? And you can't pay for an obligation outside your award period, right? It's like this whole thing. It's this whole thing. Every state deals with it a little bit differently. Sometimes they'll journal voucher costs over to the different award. Sometimes they'll allow for a plane ticket to be considered like a contract and say it obligates when you purchase because it's a contract to go. Whatever the New Mexico does, I'm not sure. I'm just highlighting the issue, and then they can help resolve it for you guys. But it is an issue, and it does come up, and that's because it's in the regulations. It says travel obligates when taken. Well, that becomes an issue only because you end up paying way well in advance from taking it, for airfare at least.
And that is a very good example, because it happens that a lot of the training happens in the summertime, and the product period is June 30th, but a lot of the professional development is July and August.
So how does the state handle it? Do you know? So in New Mexico, it would just move forward to your next grant award. And you would pay for it with your subsequent grant when you took the travel. Questions? Questions on source documentation or accounting records? Internal controls. Internal controls is in the current EDGAR, it's about a 2-sentence provision, right? It says you have to adequately safeguard all your assets and use assets solely for an authorized purpose. That's really all that it says about internal controls. Yet every audit report, every monitoring report cites to internal controls to support a large number of findings and issues. The idea here is that you have to make sure that what you purchase with your federal funds is being used for your federal program. You need to have a control system in place that makes sure that the people that are being paid with Perkins funds are working in CTE programs, right? That's all internal controls is. It consists of policies and procedures. It can be a check, an automated check perhaps within your system that matches an invoice to a contract to a delivery receipt or something, right? I mean, you can have a number of different controls in place that should be in place to make sure that everything you purchase is being used for an authorized purpose, being used by the program. One area where we see internal controls, it's always kind of comical to us, is with printers or copy machines, right? You buy a big printer or copy machine, and you say its dedicated purpose is Perkins, CTE. I pay 100% of the cost CTE funds. Well, how can I make this a dedicated copy machine? What can I do? What kind of control can I put in place so that only Perkins is using the copy machine? Anybody? A code, right? Exactly, code. That's a great internal control. Okay, I see you purchased this thing. You have a code for it. That sounds great. Can you show me the copy machine? Well, you go, and then what do we see taped above the copy machine? Is the code, right? Well, what's the point of the internal control if you're going to tape it right there? This is not serving the purpose. So it's just like one of those things that we've seen repeatedly. Another issue with internal controls that I like to tell is we were working with a grantee. They had ordered a bunch of computers, federal funds. They got delivered after business hours and were left outside under like an overpass, but outside overnight. As you might imagine, they were gone the next day, right? So all these computers disappear. They, were delivered, left. So then they reordered the second batch with federal funds again. I kid you not, they were delivered and left outside a second time and disappeared. Right? The first time, maybe there was a mistake, and the second time, okay, we have a serious internal control issue, right? Like, you should have demanded that these computers not be left unless somebody signs them in and secures them. I mean, you are not safeguarding your assets. You're not ensuring that they're being used appropriately. And so certainly when the feds came and saw that, they're going to question those costs. A lot of things, it's maybe fool me once, okay, well, you can strengthen your internal controls, but if it's a repeat issue, well, then now we're going to have some serious concerns on liability. Oh, absolutely. So it looks like I'm being told we're at break time. I do not want to conflict with break time.
Do they want it? Or we get the feel of the group?
What would you prefer, to stop or to power through? Power through. Power through. Okay, here we go. Internal controls, new language. It says, they have these recommendations on these documents for strong internal controls. I guess some people are going, some people are saying, all right, we got the internal control. Budget control, that's also part of your finance management system. It exists in old rules. It exists in new rules. It really hasn't changed much. Cash management procedures, for our secondary folks, they must be written. And our post-secondary folks, but post-secondary folks are already supposed to be written. But for our secondary folks, this is a new requirement that you have written cash management procedures. Everyone in here is receiving their funds on a reimbursement basis, right? So you need to have written procedures about that reimbursement basis and an explanation on how you manage your cash, right? That's a requirement, a federal requirement. If you had advance payments, well, then you'd have to minimize the time between the advance and the disbursement, but I'm going to go through that since you don't have advance payments. And so the other, so I just skipped a whole bunch of slides because you guys are doing a reimbursement basis, and those slides are based on an advance payment system. Finally, financial management system, number 7, written allowability procedures. Now, you've always had to make sure that your costs are consistent with the cost principles and that they're allowable. But now you need a set of written procedures. So if I'm a monitor and I come to your district or to your post-secondary institution and I say, show me your written cash management procedures, show me your written conflict of interest policy, show me your written allowability procedures, you should be able to produce those documents. And if you can't produce those documents, well, then it's an easy finding for an auditor or for a monitor because they're required to be in writing. You're required to have those documents as a federal education grant recipient. What does it mean to have an allowability procedures, written procedures? What does that even look like? Generally, it should really document kind of your whole process of budgeting, looking at appropriate costs, identifying the needs for your program, looking and matching your expenditures to those needs. And then, of course, there should be a reference to the cost principles. I keep mentioning cost principles. When I talk about that, I'm talking about reasonable, necessary, allocable, those magic 3 terms that you hear all over and over and over again. There are a couple of changes to the equipment rules. So I just finished up financial management system. What do we think about that? Any questions? Yes?
Can you tell what would be the interest? You said that that's new with the interest. What is that?
So the question is, when we talked about accounting records, and it added the word interest and took out liabilities, and that you have to have accounting records that demonstrate any interest earned. Some grantees that receive advances have to calculate and remit interest back to the federal government. Because you don't receive advance payments, you're only receiving reimbursements, you're probably not generating interest on your Perkins funds. But other, grantees or subgrantees might receive an advance payment and then generate interest, and they'd have to account for that interest. Any other questions? So equipment.